I'm looking at another of the Viva l'Empereur series, Three Battles in Germany, because I don't want to challenge my French pronunciations at this point. Kind of trying to work my way towards the big Leipzig scenario. And I have this one, then I have Hanau and Leipzig kind of sitting, waiting to be done. The last one I did, I have two Leipzig games. I have an OSG one that's probably more operational. The last one that I did was the Return of the Emperor over there. And that was after a long wait. I had played, the Spanish one, also by Legion, and the couple of old Friedland there, and I have another one kicking around, Ekmal, the old AWE ones of Dieter Roy's series. I really like the series, but I'm finding a certain set of challenges. First of all, as always, the rules are very, very loosely written. These rules, I guess some attempt has been made to tighten them up a little bit, but the writing to them has a certain looseness to it that I enjoy. I'm okay with that. Unfortunately, the scenario setups are also a little such, and I decided to play a scenario that doesn't actually exist, which we'll talk about that. Maybe I'll change my mind a little bit on how I'm implementing that. So what I'm doing, and I have not fully set up, these are kind of forces that are in boundary areas and have to be set up. And that's one of the first challenges I faced, other than sorting the pieces that I had sorted by nationality. Now this covers 3 different battles, 2 of which I'm playing. The other one is the Siege of Danzig, which I'll do next. I'm very excited about that for various reasons, but we'll talk about that in that one. But the rules don't impart a real good vision of the game. I figure, well, the hell with it. I've played it before. I should be able to pick it up. It's a little different system from most tactical systems, plus it's Napoleonic, which just immediately creates a certain complexity to it. It's not like, American Civil War imparts a certain lack of complexity, right? I guess that's the better way of putting it, because honestly, Napoleonic is not anything particularly special. You have multiple arms that operate a little differently from one another. You don't have a very simplistic view of how to deploy your forces. Here I've got forces in relatively close position to each other, right here, and also perhaps here. And I don't know how to utilize the system anymore. And everything's not completely free setup, but you gotta know how to align your forces. So questions like, do I deploy my infantry with my artillery come to light? And that's not absolutely clear until you've played around with the game a little bit. I think some of the earlier ones gave you fixed setups, but I'm not absolutely certain about that. One problem with fixed setups, there's no hex numbers in this game. So I'm stuck with this kind of, geez, you couldn't easily deploy things. I seem to remember the Waterloo, the 4 battles around Waterloo set, gave pretty damn specific location setups that made it much, much more difficult to screw up. This is a little bit more flexible. Things like you set up in this triangle here, more or less. So I've got a little bit of trouble with that. And I'm not so worried here. I don't have a lot here. I have a little bit of cav that starts on the board if I play the starting place that I'm starting to do. Another problem I have is I don't remember how the order sheets look like in this. I'm not sure I remembered when I did the last one either. I think I kind of fudged it, and I can probably more or less fudge it and make corrections as I go. The orders have a couple of pieces of information that I guess they need to have, and I'll be able to suss that out. But it requires a little bit of thinking. It would be kind of useful to have a template the way the Nessic games, there's several series of them, do for, here's how you write the orders for this. These are the important pieces of information. Now, I found some of them were superfluous, and I may find that to be the case here as well. But basically, I think that there's going to be a couple of key pieces of information. One, when the order gets to the unit, I'm going to play with the written orders options. I'm playing with most of the options. When the order is actually going to start to be implemented, and the text of the order itself, and the status of the order. Orders can lose status. It's not as complex a system as like the brigade series or regimental series that the gamers under Essig have written. Let me think what else. So I suppose I should kind of flip through the rules and talk a little bit. I'm not going to go into detail in the rules. Unfortunately, the newest rule books are on glossy paper, so although they may have tightened up some problems with the rules, but not many, it's still written in such a loose style that it's somewhat difficult to cope with. And this is the thing, when you're dealing with free setup, you kind of have to know all the rules at once. So things like stacking, yeah, I can look that up as I start to move some pieces when I have that question. Now, and sure, you have to know it right away, but now you have to know it before you even start the game. And I'm finding that kind of a barrier. Fields of Fire. Most units have a 1 hex range. The musketry to the range of the hexes is quite limited. I'm going to be playing with the skirmishers, the Voltigeurs, as opposed to the Trialias option. I'm gonna try to play with most of the optional rules just because I like getting into those. Limit lesser artillery losses to artillery fire, fatigue, everything like that. And I've done most of these before. But like the command and control rules, they're kind of oddly written. They give you 5 different options for command and control. The 5th one is basically, hey, each leader on the board or whatever is played by a player. I can't really do that. But the level 4 is sort of the most detailed of them. But what happens is some of the rules from previous modules of the commanding or previous implementations of command and control module apply. So you have to read through them all, but then some get withdrawn or modified. And so it's kind of painful. Again, it's the organization of the rules that gets me to a painful situation here. Orders will almost always be accepted in this game. There is some foot dragging, but there's very little, there's much less of a chance of the leader not getting or simply ignoring a set of orders. It can happen. It's not that often. There's also less specifics around, oh, you can't change this order to that order. You can't try to implement the same order because the leader's not, not likely to implement it the first time he gets it. But there's less need for that. Strategic deployment is something I'm not using. I haven't used that before. That has to do with dividing the map up and kind of simulating an approach battle situation. I don't think it would apply in this game. I think I'll also avoid the alternating actions, which gives you sort of a chit pull type, and certainly the time limits. This gives you sort of a chit pull kind of operation where you get to pick which chit you pulled at each time, but it means that you're not moving all your units in complete coordination. I don't feel like that's that necessary because of the orders. I feel like this is more of a valuable option if you're playing without the full-blown order system. Just personal views there. But most of the rules seemed fairly familiar to me, even if I don't know how to implement them anymore. And here's the thing. Without sort of fixed setup and without a play sequence in order, this is a series that's very hard to approach, just because of maybe that, hey, set your units up at the beginning and figure out how they operate from this relatively loose set of rules. And again, the way the units operate is a little different from how they operate in most games, most tactical games. So it's harder to kind of get that grasp. You can't rely quite as much on some of the other factors that you have. But then in terms of the scenario itself, this is where I got some problems. So there's a lot of different configurations for these battles. First of all, Jena. This is Jena and Auerstaedt, which are both near each other, which is why I'm doing them both at the same time, because there's some option in this game for interaction between the two maps. How likely it is, I don't know. But Jena is a ridiculous battle. You have the entire French army facing what is really a smaller portion of the Prussian army. And then over at Auerstaedt, you have one French corps under Davout that wins this stunning victory against the majority of the Prussian army and sends it reeling back. Jena doesn't seem like that interesting a situation in the historical sense. And if you play the historical scenario, which is what I'm doing but linked together, you end up with really kind of a, well, how badly do the Prussians lose? And your victory conditions are to lose not quite as badly. Because there's just no opportunity to win this battle as the Prussians. And there are some special conditions that deal with the game not really, with the Prussians being a little bit more locked down. They have some command problems. Their army, their commander of the army at Jena isn't on the board at the beginning. Some of the units are locked in place. Just crap like that, and we'll get to that more when I go further. And I kind of feel like this is creating a weird sort of introduction here, just because I'm having such a struggle with setting up. So then the next thing is you have options for different scenarios that you want to play. And the first one is kind of, for Jena is kind of this early morning battle here in the fog. And then you have additional slices of the historical situation. That's great. And then you have a complete campaign battle for the historical in there. And again, that's what I'm going to be playing on the Jena map. And then you have a few what-ifs to make things a little bit more interesting. to make the battle a little bit more challenging. And you can put those in. Then you go to Auerstaedt, and you have a full historical scenario. There's less units on the board. It's a smaller battle, although there's more Prussians on the board. But it doesn't have as many options. Well, it has options going after, but it gives you this whole battle. But the whole battle starts at 8 a.m., not at the 6 a.m. that Jena starts at. However, there's engagement prior to 8 a.m. So there's this opening moves through the fog scenario that takes you from 6 to 8:30. And one of the issues that happens here is there's a pile of Prussian units that I think are camped on the board and will reappear, and there's no rules for putting them on the board during this 6 to 8:30, but they show up starting at the 8 a.m. for the historical scenario. Now, I want to try to play that opening moves part and flow into the main scenario, and I'm trying to figure out a way, and that's why I say I'm not really playing a real scenario. When you get to the Auerstaedt, there are not rules for what I'm trying to do exactly. And then there's a few others. Hey, what if Bernadotte and the First Corps show up over at Auerstaedt, which makes it, much more of a pro-French situation. It turns the situation much more in favor of the French. This is a challenging battle. Davout won tremendously. Can you manage that? Well, let's look at what the victory points are. So the victory conditions for this involve taking locations and destroying the Prussian army, or doing damage to it. For the full scenario of Jena, the victory is when Hohenlohe is destroyed. Now, one of these has you have a right, the Prussians have an advantage to withdrawing. And I kind of skimmed through this stuff. And you really kind of have to piece through and try to figure out how you're going to make this thing work. Even if you're playing with one of the fixed scenarios, it's not necessarily trivial because, again, the author is very loose in some of his descriptions. I love this system, and I like the looseness in the rules to a certain extent, although but when you get to setup, it's really kind of painful to deal with. And now, I thought one of these had, so the Prussian player gets points for holding certain locations. Here they go. The Prussians get points for leaving Auerstaedt. By one road or the other. And it's kind of an interesting situation. I don't think they have a retreat for Jena. I'm trying to find it because I have to find the right scenario. So the French are the only ones getting victory conditions here, which is when they have knocked out the Prussian army for the most part. Okay, that's one side of things if these two scenarios were played separately. But then you come to what intrigues me, which is combining the two. Because they are close enough, like Wavre and Quatre-Bras, they are close enough to actually interact. There's a possibility to move forces between them. They don't spell that out here, I think. What they go into is 4 alternative scenarios to the historical campaign. They don't really give a, here's the historical. So they give one here that, that explains a more unified command to the Prussian army, and then one that gives Brunswick, I don't know what the hell, being better positioned or something. Yeah. And then Clausewitz's analysis of how this campaign should have been fought by the Prussians, giving a different deployment, and then another deployment where there's more forces. You know, the Prussian army is better coordinated. Wartburg's reserves, which didn't make it at all, and Reichel start on the map, and also they get to kind of set up more freely under this. And then we get to these special rules. Now this applies for any of the scenarios. Okay, that's fine. Including a different way that the Voltigeurs are handled. Because we're kind of early in the, I don't know why. But the French line infantry only have 1 per regiment. Normally it's 2, I think. Prussian and Saxons won't have any, but the Fusiliers will have 2, which is like normal infantry, and same with the sharpshooters. But there's an interaction between the maps, and this is between Apolda and Auerstaedt. So I gotta find Auerstaedt. Auerstadt's down here hiding under there. That goes to Apolda. Apolda is up here going to Auerstaedt. So that's where our connection is. I could have reformatted things so that these were closer to each other. Screw it. I can deal with this. Where does this go? Okay. But it basically takes about 3 hours for a unit to transit between the 2 maps. And units that are sent off map while enemy units are off map, they kind of cancel each other out. Not as losses. Some kind of thing is happening there where you don't have to you're not going to fight out the battles because you can't actually do that. But additional forces beyond the steps that are committed will be able to make their way onto the map for whatever that goes. So that's one of a couple problems that I'm facing here is trying to orient these things. Now, the biggest problem I have right now is probably the Auerstaedt, those extra units, which what's going to happen for me is I guess at 7:30 or 8, they're going to just show up where they would have shown up on the 8 a.m. Board, and I'll try to fix that. But anyway, I may end up with some really ridiculous initial setups because I do have a certain level of free setup here. All right. And one thing this definitely is doing is it's definitely causing me enough angst that I'm having a hard time getting set up. If this had been an easy to set up game, in terms of like, you know, clear hex descriptions as to where you put your units and whatnot, as opposed to in some triangle or whatever, in some region, I would have been completely set up and ready to start moving some pieces. I might still make some errors in terms of, you know, trying to manipulate the units in ways that they really shouldn't be used. But I have another issue which has to do with the pieces in the game. You're going to need a lot of these markers. I think I'm going to have to do what I did before with the Napoleonic and pull some replacement pieces out of, you know, Eckmühl or Friedland in order, and the reason for that is they'll look different so that I can sort them back to where they belong for some of the number counters. Because the number counters, there might be enough for doing both battles at once under the standard rules, but if you're playing with the Voltigeurs, you need additional pieces to indicate those. If you're playing, what are these? I thought these were the Voltigeurs. Thought you could use these for skirmishers. I don't remember. Maybe I have something that tells me. Okay, so not there. So I think what they tell you is to use number counters, which, man, that's just going to be hell. But there's no description of what those counters are for. Oh boy. Yeah, I should be here. Optional rules, Voltigeurs. Yeah, using numerical markers or specific markers provided in future games. I think you use these, but there clearly are not enough of them to be able to be used. And I think there was a much larger number in the Waterloo quad. Anyway, just to give you an idea of sort of the struggles I have moving forward with this. And, you know, this is a series I've played several games of, right? I mean, I think I played the Friedland and Eckmühl at one little time period. I played the Spanish battles at another time period. I played the Waterloo campaign at yet another time. You'd think by now I'd feel comfortable. None of them are that far back in the past, right? These are all things that I've done in the last 10 years with the, well, but it has been, I did the Waterloo stuff back in Phoenix, so it's been about 5 years since I touched any of them. And, you know, when I do Napoleonic Brigade series, one of the reasons I've been so reluctant to play it is there's a big burden to learning that again, you know, and not so much with the CWB. That's burned into my head, but I've done so few of the Napoleonic Brigade series. There are so few games of it, and I've played, you know, most of them only once, with a couple exceptions, but yeah, so. Whatever. The snow coming down pretty good now. Not a whole lot accumulating, but, you know, more than is usual here. The problem is that last time we had this much snow, and it was more than this, is when a bunch of my trees fell. And it wasn't a pleasant situation. I've been putting off starting my game because I don't know, a number of reasons. One, Christmas depression or whatever, but also simply that it gets, I'm getting these really bad headaches that aren't kind of going away. I don't know, the last couple of days. And I don't know, just really adds to the difficulty there. So we'll see if I keep going. I don't know. I ask myself to face up to this problem now that it's night on the day after Christmas, taking Christmas off completely and most of today. Pretty snow, you know. I just curled up in my bean bags and kind of snoozed and watched the snow and whatnot. But so I'm going to use sort of the standard that I get from the ESSIG games, a column for identifying the order, an arrival time, and then a status with the order to be written here. And I've already set up the pieces, stacking artillery on top of units where I expect there to be fire. I think that's how I should do it, but I don't know. You know, well, we'll see. You know, I may learn that, gosh, this system really doesn't like that. And, you know, I don't remember anything along those lines. I did read through the rules. And then I worried about something as I was flipping through, looking for, hey, what's the state of initial orders? Because I seem to remember you're allowed to write some initially accepted orders, as you are in the ESSIG games. I didn't find that rule, but I got distracted and found the Army morale rule. And I'm like, that's interesting. I don't remember seeing anything about that. Okay. In the specific rules. And I look here and there's no values for it here. I look a little closer into the rules. Well, first I look in the specific rules because the first thing I see was something that mentions the specific rules, maybe just this, what a given level of losses, doesn't tell you what those are. Well, down here it gives you what demoralization can be, half the total possible losses. Well, what does that mean? You know, some elite corps, you know, is that little mark boxes off, whatever? Well, somewhere, it kind of tells you. When the demoralization, the Army Corps morale starts, it includes the number of disorganized units. Crossing that level can be reversible. Yeah, so it's got to be by unit, okay? It's the number of units lost or demoralized. Okay, so this gives me a baseline number here, half the total possible losses. I don't have what the total number is. And this is also at the Army or Corps total. Well, does it apply to everything that counts as a corps? Corps are kind of structured a little weird in this scenario, or in these scenarios, but there's no mention of anything. I'm looking at Auerstaedt right now. I didn't look in Jena, but there's nothing here in the special rules for it, and I don't think there's anything back here in the combined rules. Well, yeah, here we go. All the standard rules related to Army morale apply. Okay, so desperation morale is when the Army or Corps total reaches a level indicated in the special rules. Well, this one does not give me an option. This one gives me kind of a, hey, half total possible losses. No rule here. It's a pity because that's one of the best rules that allows you to rout the enemy off the field. The demoralization just makes the Army a little bit softer, you know, and okay, you know, whatever. I wonder if, I don't see any victory points for demoralizing or anything in here. And then if we go to the historical scenario here, because we're doing both, we have no rules about it here, but they give you victory at 2/3 of the Prussian units. And they actually tell you how many there are by the end of that battle. Now remember though, this is a little twisted because I've got both battles going, which means technically I should be using, I had to make life more difficult, didn't I? Technically I should be using this, which is 2/3 of the Prussian armies based on the scenario. Well, each battle should be a separate thing, and that's, even though they're connected, there should be a certain segmentation between them, because units that have left this might still show up here and win a battle here after this battle has been lost. There's not really a capability of communicating easily between the two battlefields to get you completely out of the area. So that feels a little funky too. I feel like I'm trying to piece things together that just, you know, it seems like the most obvious case, right? Let's do the historical with the bridging of the two battles. And unfortunately, there's no fucking support for it at all. Anyway, I don't have the desperation morale, but I would guess that 2/3 is probably where it would be. And they're just saying, screw it, it's not in there. You know, we're not covering it. Which is weird because the Auerstaedt goes to the end of the game no matter what. And if you're doing the combined battles, the majority of the Prussian army is over here at Auerstaedt. So you're really unlikely to get that 2/3, right? You get the 2/3 here, and you might break the army at Jena. Destroying the army at Auerstaedt, that's a hard task. I don't know if Davout did that, right? Davout won the battle and held the field, but I don't know if he destroyed that much of the army you know, in terms of demoralizations and whatnot. I get the feeling no, but yeah. So again, I'm going to wander off in semi-defeat because I'm just having too hard a time getting started here and not a lot of motivation to do so. I really don't give a fuck anymore. Camera fucked up on me again, this weird recording error thing, and then I have to reset the date and time. I don't know what's up with that. Becoming more regular. But I found what I was looking for. It's in a stupid place as far as I'm concerned. But again, these rules are so loosey-goosey that it's really hard to find the things you want that you kind of know are there. In this case, it's under the 3rd level command and control and is not withdrawn. And, you know, that's not that unreasonable given what I know about it. But it's buried in the middle of the special cases. At the start of the game, each leader has an initial order freely allocated by the players. The owning player can choose any order except if specified otherwise in the scenario. Now I have to pick through the scenario notes and see if there's anything that kind of restricts things. Because I know there are some restrictions over here on the Auerstaedt map that make things kind of weird. The other thing is, I don't have core on the board on Auerstaedt. I at least have leaders on the board here. Napoleon's command, you know, army leaders on the board, that's fine. I can write orders. I have Lan, I have the guard as well. Somewhere here, Lefebvre. For the Prussians, it's a little bit more complicated because there's no army leader on the map. There are restrictions, though, that are fixed in play to prevent stuff from happening. Like, these units can't do shit until a certain time anyway. Those are fixed restrictions that apply even if you're using, like, no order systems or the level 1 command and control type stuff only. Which may actually be problematic because, again, there's no leader up there. Actually, I don't know if there's a leader on the board. I do not see a core leader on the board for the Prussians at all, which causes problems at all levels. I don't remember this being this problematic. Like in the Waterloo scenario, I remember there being plenty of corps leaders around, and I had, you know, a couple divisions or whatever under each leader, and they all operated kind of separately, and it all worked pretty well. This one almost doesn't seem to fit with the command and control rules. When I look at the scenario rules, though, let's take a look at, geez, these. Let's take a look at the Auerstaedt morning one. So do not use command and control in the first scenario. Okay, that makes sense because there's no one on the board. Fair enough. But for the historical, which starts at 8, they do allow them all. And then when we go to, and that's when troops and leaders start showing up. When we go to we're looking at the complete battle here. Any level of command and control, all Prussian units are out of command until the arrival of a Hohenlohe. What does that mean to be out of command? Well, I guess it means they kind of defend in place. Normally, you're not completely out of command. You know? So here, the effect of first level doesn't even have, and it just adds the leaders to add some sort of modifier. But here, the leaders have to be out of command, can only be identified. They remained out of command. What's the effect? I'm not used to doing this to myself. Not that I'm used to playing this right now. Obviously independent units. Thanks. How are they obviously independent? They cannot voluntarily exit their hex except if they attempt to come back within their commander's radius. There is no commander. They remain out of command for that turn, even if this brings them into range. So yeah, the Prussians are basically not going to be allowed to move over here. Here, I don't know. I make up rules because this is just a weird situation where you're not supposed to be playing the early morning part of the scenario in the historical game. You're allowed to play it in all the others. And guess with everything out of command, I don't have to write any orders for the Prussians. I'll have to think of some from the French. But again, I don't have a lot of willpower right now. On top of everything else that's gone wrong in my life, there's more now, and you know, it's just, yeah, my dad's just got out of the ICU with COVID-like symptoms, but not testing positive, and I'm assuming he's going to die before the end of the year, just because that's the kind of shit that happens. As per prior discussions, I think I have basically one set of orders to write. I wrote them for 5th Corps, Lanz Corps, marching up to get up to there. You know, there are rules in the orders thing that say, don't, you know, these are bad orders. They don't say you can't do them. They say they're bad orders, and they give you reasons why they're bad. It's not a prohibition, so I kind of get more the feeling that you don't want to do these because they can put you in a horrible position. So if I had made orders to just attack and pursue, whatever the hell these are, this detachment here, under no one, then there would be potential impacts of, well, I just have to keep following them wherever they go, which might be precisely what I want to have happen if I'm, you know, doing some kind of pursuit type battle or something. It might be exactly what I want, as opposed to take geographical objectives. And so that's how I'm reading those kind of order, that kind of statement that these are bad orders, is that there's no prohibition against writing orders like that. There's just sort of the designer is saying, you probably don't want to write your orders this way. Because they do give the impact of it, and I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes that's what I want to do. All right, on to another thing, as I, you know, try to ramp my way up to actually playing. I'm having a hard time. Maybe if I had read the rules aloud, that second rereading of the rules, the way that I tend to do, maybe that would have helped I don't like to do that when I've done the rules reading with other games in the system, though. But here we have the committing the Imperial Guard. Imperial Guard usually has special rules in every game in this series because, you know, think of the Waterloo situation. You put the Guard in, they don't succeed. That's the sign the army broke. Well, here, they were committed to fire and engage only when everything was going wrong. Well, that doesn't happen here, and very rarely before. These 6 infantry units can be committed only if a French army corps at Jena reaches the demoralization level. Sounds fine. In that case, committing the Guard has no consequences. What? Okay. If the French player chooses to commit any infantry unit before a corps is demoralized, presumably Guard infantry, then all morale levels of the corps present at Jena increase by 10. Increase? Seriously? All morale levels increase by 10. That just doesn't sound reasonable. Okay, let's take a look. Let's find the morale rules and see how those work. Okay. Each unit has a morale basic value, usually in the 7 to 11 range. When you're fired upon and you take a morale check, you roll 2 dice. If it's lower than or equal to the morale value, the check succeeds. Okay, so committing the Guard has no consequences, but if you choose to commit the Guard units before a corps is demoralized, then all morale levels of the corps present increase by 10. Now, what do they mean morale level of the corps? Is that army morale? I don't think so. It sounds to me like if you commit the Guard without good reason, you have just made all of the French army completely impervious to morale checks, which to me is a bunch of bullshit. Let's see if there's more. The units may otherwise move freely on the map. This restriction does not apply to the what-if scenarios at the French player's discretion. I don't even know what this is meant to express. I just do not. Increasing the morale level of units by 10 means something, and it sounds incredibly good, and I want to throw the Guard in first thing in every battle because now my units will never break. By the way I read this, I have no clue what it's meant to express. On the other hand, if I just follow that first part, that it has no effect, I'm pretty good. Corps do not have their own morale as such. The corps designated, let's see, let's find a French force here. Corps are designated kind of like this. They don't have a morale. They have breakpoints on particular units that indicate that the morale of those units has been reduced. The army has a morale of its own, but it's based on how many units are broken. Now, what that may mean, what they may be trying to express is that the army morale, not the corps that they're talking about, counts as 10 extra broken units if you throw the Guard in for some reason. Which means if you're kind of close to, starting to show problems and you throw the Guard in at that point, or if you throw it in early and you become close later, you may hit army demoralization levels more quickly. That may be what it's intending to say. what it actually says in words does not work. It just does not work. And if it's 10 per corps, well, that's really weird. That would depend on how big your army is. Like, the bigger the army, the more impact it is to throw the guard in early. I just have no idea. Anyway, there's no reason for me to give orders to the Imperial Guard. They're perfectly fine up where they are and are not committed. So I'm good. Been delaying long enough. Do I think I can keep delaying, or do I have to start moving some pieces? Let's move a few pieces, I guess. I have to worry about the thick fog in place. Now, I look here. I look at Auerstaedt. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. First, the thick fog. Infantry and foot can use a maximum of 4 movement points. Well, that's what they have in line, so not too big a deal. Cav and horse artillery use a maximum of 6. For regular movement in non-trail, non-road, leaders use their printed. Disorganized units use their full printed movement factor. Units following a long movement of trail or road are not limited in movement. Okay. Artillery firepower is divided by 2, and maximum range is 2 hexes. Maximum cav charge distance is 2 hexes, and tirailleurs have a firepower of 1 at a range of 2. I'm not going to be playing with them. Okay, so that tells me some of the beginning things as I move forward. I've got an accepted order there. For Auerstaedt, which is sort of the special case, because we're playing this opening moves through the fog scenario before we start the real scenario, and this is the one thing that the game does not support that I'm trying to do. Okay. This has a few things. One, no command and control rules, which I guess means I can move anything anywhere I like in this initial period. Which might make sense because Blücher is like in charge or something. So victory conditions are: the Prussian has only cav in the scenario. He cannot hope of holding Hohenstaufen, whatever, or Hassenhausen, whatever that is. He wins if no French infantry unit is in good order outside of any village at the end of turn 6. Otherwise, this is a French victory. I think this is an impossible scenario for the Prussians because there's nothing that stops me from putting the infantry in the woods on like the last turn of the scenario, and they're pretty damn invulnerable to cavalry at that point, from what I understand. Maybe I'm mistaken. Take a look at the effect of woods. That's forest. The infantry will be in general order. Costs a whole bunch of movement points for a cav charge. Effects on melee. The infantry is reduced to their column value, but the cav is reduced to 1. And firing, you're pretty shitty, but who cares? You know, you're pretty much immune to what the cav can possibly do to you. So I just don't see a way for the Prussians to win this scenario as written anyway. But let's keep looking because there's more. The thick fog is in effect. They give the reminders of this, and then this optional rule, which I'm going to play with because it's fun. In charge of the avant-garde, Blücher just could not refrain from charging everywhere whoever he was in front of him, especially in the dense fog. Yeah, that sounds like him. To reflect this, every Prussian cavalry adjacent to a French unit in his turn must charge. Okay. I think I'm just not going to move my friend. Although I may pull my cav back a little bit because it looks a little exposed out there. There's more Prussian cav than French cav, right? Let me, it's difficult for me to read these counters just because they're set up. So what do we have here? We have, this is the number of steps. The melee value is the red number up here, the 3. So they've got a little bit more. The type of cav is based on the speed. These are lights, heavy, medium. Morale is 8 across the board. That's not bad. And I don't see anything else of interest. So I think I probably want to bring my cav and get it out of the way, because I'm outnumbered and don't really want to face that. Now, looks to me like Davout comes on maybe early. Yeah, Davout comes on pretty early with a whole bunch of infantry. So, yeah, I just don't see how the Prussians are going to have a chance here. Okay. That's a 6 o'clock. Yeah. Where do they come in? Well, strangely, they don't tell you. That's interesting. I'm gonna guess along this road. Okay. I'll guess. And yeah. Alrighty. And the Prussians have no orders. Now, that means the infantry and artillery can't do shit, but the cav can do some stuff. If I recall, they're kind of loose from command and control. But I don't know where that's written. A cav corps is autonomous. Yeah, I'm not sure I can do a shitty thing with my cav, because that's not cav corps. That's cav units. I mean, they can countercharge, but yeah, I don't think they can help defend their position or anything. God. All right, we'll dig into the rules again, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we're not going to move a piece. I'm trying to piece this all together. And again, this one, to me, this one has specific rules to the scenario that challenge this system in a way that, like the Labatt Dresden game, which I have kicking around somewhere, I don't remember where, which just so totally foiled me. I mean, Dresden, it's beautiful map and pieces and everything, unless you're used to Labatt and ready to apply different rules than the ones that come with the game. It just ended up a task that was beyond, especially with the amount of errors in the setup and everything. But with this, I feel like, wow, I really wish I had played some of the other ones just before I got to this. I'm playing this one because I wanted to, ramp my way up to the big one. But I have not remembered feeling this lost in this system before. Maybe look at the Return of the Emperor and see if I had the same kind of just what the fuck is going on. I don't feel like I did. I felt like I ramped into that reasonably well for how loosely these rules tend to be written. Oh boy. I don't think these rules are at fault either. I think this is approximately the same rule set that I was working with. It just feels like this situation where there's no fucking leaders on the board. What does that mean? Now, by the specific rules of the scenario, I wouldn't be allowed to do anything with any of these forces. But these guys would be free to move without command and control. But there's no leader. And that kind of means nothing can be done with them as soon as you impose any command and control. And that's a problem. Here I have a light infantry over here on the Prussian side. That's allowed to have one of these out here, I guess. It's not going to make much difference. I think all the French line infantry are allowed to have one. These guys are allowed to have three. They're the lights. We're going to be able to brush this aside with one of ours. What that means is kind of hard to tell because the deployment rules for these, and I remember running into this problem before and not being sure how to cope with it. Let's find these guys. They're in the Voltigeurs rule. When are you allowed to throw them out onto the board? This is voluntary during the movement phase or involuntary when somebody enters the hex. When infantry or artillery enters a Voltigeur hex, they trigger an opportunity fire if they enter from in front, and the Voltigeurs are reintegrated. If the infantry enters preceded by a Voltigeur, then the two Voltigeurs... Okay. So they don't cancel out until you enter the hex. So you could have, I guess, Voltigeurs from both sides in the same space, which I didn't think was the case. That's how I kind of misread it, I think. If the infantry is preceded by its Voltigeur, then the two Voltigeurs annihilate each other and no opportunity fire is performed. No. I'm missing something there. This action is voluntary during movement phase or involuntary when a friendly or enemy unit enters the hex where the Voltigeur is. A unit can deploy Voltigeurs once during his movement phase and once at the end of his rally phase. Okay. Yeah. So the important thing there, I think, is that I can't cancel out the enemy's Voltigeur and then throw mine back out. I think that's the thing. It doesn't specify this in clear enough words to state it. You know, like at the beginning of your movement or at the end of your movement is the only times you can do it or something like that. If you could do it at the end of your movement, you would be able to move forward with Voltigeurs, cancel out, and then place your Voltigeurs again. And that's the thing I don't want to allow to happen. All right. I guess we just move forward. This is what things look like. We canceled out the Voltigeurs there, so we're right up with units there. Prussians are going to get their defensive fire. I've got artillery going up against the infantry here, firing at the skirmishers. They've got a penalty, but on the other hand, they don't have much fire value, so it's sort of a weird mix as to whether or not you want to throw your line right up against the enemy. I chose, although I had enough movement points not to, I chose to advance in a more calm manner, in part because I have to climb this hill in this one. So, you know, my line would be more ragged otherwise. Cav sliding around to defend the flanks. Guards still up on the hill, all fine. I gotta stay outside of a 2-hex range of these guys, or it releases them with no orders, which in this system, if you have no orders, you're on defensive orders. You immediately fall to those. So they actually do have some kind of order, but those defensive orders, the way they're defined is like you define a front line and you can't cross that. And it seems like you can maybe fall back as much as you need to. I would be a little disturbed to see a withdrawal being handled that way, because withdrawal is a specific kind of order. Then over here I pulled my cav back a little bit. Davout's coming on, you know, whatever. I'm about to start fire, but I need a break. So that's going to be defensive fire here. And You know, I mean, it's not like I've done much, right? This is stuff that takes like 5 minutes or so in terms of the movement and everything, but it's just the mental burden of trying to figure out what the fuck everything, how the pieces are working together is quite high right now. We have to look up the rules to try to figure out what the hell goes on with these voltigeurs. I'm looking at this. Hey, -1 if target is skirmish. The term skirmish is never used in the rules, as far as I know. I didn't do an electronic search. But there's two terms that relate to skirmisher-like formations. Voltigeurs, which is what I'm using, which seem not to be able to be fired on at all. And tirailleurs, which is when you take a light unit and you spread it over 2 hexes, and it's sort of the basic rule version of the voltigeurs. There are differences. The tirailleurs are able to fire with full firepower at a range of 2, and that's deemed too powerful, I think. So they went with the voltigeurs, which is more like this cloud of skirmishers that fits with earlier games, the Napoleonic Brigade series as one example, the Wellington's Victory, the old SPI one, also has clouds of skirmishers that come out and, you know, serve a certain purpose. I don't really recall the Wellington's Victory. I played Monmouth recently, which is based on that system, but doesn't have skirmishers in it. I can't remember if Wellington's Victory does, or if they're just incorporated. So let me leave that alone. But I don't remember if you can fire on them in that, or if they even exist, to tell you the truth. I thought they did, but I'm beginning to question that. Because I've played Ney versus Wellington, which definitely uses that, but that was a long, long time ago, and I don't recall that very well. But in the Napoleonic Brigade system, you basically straggle your skirmishers. They weaken your unit, and they can be fired on, and they can be killed, but they're not very easy to kill. Here, when I look at the voltigeurs rules, first of all, if you were playing with the tirailleurs, nothing but light units could fire back at you, because regular units don't have the range to do so. Here, when I look at the voltigeurs, though, they don't talk about them being able to be fired on. And that I see when I look at it. But if you fire through them, you get a penalty, which might be, I mean, it doesn't say the target is skirmishers. You know, the light infantry or whatever infantry breaking some skirmishers off, that's a sort of standard maneuver. It's not the target, but anyway. And we don't have anything that covers the voltigeur, which is, yes, it's an advanced rule, therefore semi-optional or something. I don't know how to put that. I mean, the advanced rules are all optional rules. So advanced rules is the section that contains the optional rules, and I think that's kind of all it contains. Well, no, then it goes to command and control, so I don't know. So these may be less advanced and more optional. I don't know. I see them as two different things that are related, you know, but generally advanced rules are what you would, in sort of the Avalon Hill parlance, they're the, yeah, we really think you should play this, but, you know, maybe not the first time, as opposed to optional, which is, these are interesting little modifiers, but you know, you're not really, I don't know. Anyway, I do not see anything about firing on them until we get to this. With the exceptions stated above, they are not considered as units. Wait. They cannot be attacked in any way. Okay, well, that's pretty clear. All right. So we're not going to see a lot of defensive fire. And, you know, we'll see how effective they are. If you want to get someplace quickly, you can't rely on skirmishers to do that. So I'm kind of learning the system anew. We'll go through this. So the fire value is the red number. And we'll take a look at this infantry line, which is firing a 4 strength point at another infantry line right in front of it. So that'll be fire value 4. I don't see any special cases. We roll a 1, so we do nothing. Okay. And then we've got artillery, which usually requires slightly different rolls. So let me make sure that I understand. We didn't get opportunity fire. That's when you leave a hex, but when you're being meleeed, it also happens. Again, all kinds of stuff to try to remember here. Artillery firepower is halved when an artillery loses one of its 2 steps. Formation impacts some of these. But this has a firepower of 5. I will pick on, I don't know. Let's pick on the heavy firepower unit there. Now I am at range 2. It says artillery loses 1 per hex from fire to target. I don't know. I think I only lose 1 for this, not 2. Line of sight for artilleries and skirmishers. I don't know. Oh, for skirmishers because they can fire, because so the word is used here, but the trioliers is what they mean. Yeah, they don't really say anything that jumps out there. So I don't know. Like normally I would call that a 2 hex range, and therefore per hex from fire to target as opposed to between, but I remember something that said something absolutely the opposite in here. And artillery firepower is halved. No, that doesn't help. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I remember seeing something that said it was 1 in this, that you count the intervening hexes and not this, but I don't know where the fuck I saw it, and I don't know what it means. But range is not being covered in here in any way that I can tell. All right, I'm going to look some more. Note, the further an artillery fires, the less efficient its fire attack is. Maybe there's something on counting hexes? I don't fucking remember. I mean, I really remember something, and it may have been... I'm just not holding together here. Maybe it's in the artillery rules. I know I read those. if I can find them. No. Oh, wait, unlimbered artillery. Range-dependent fire value. Here we go. The fire value decreases with distance to the target. Subtract the number of hexes between. For example, if the target is 3 hexes away, 2 empty, the fire value will be -2. Yeah, that's, I was right about what I saw. So, we get a fire value of 5, goes down to 4 because I'm 2 hexes away, which equals -1 per hex, because 2 hexes equals 1 somehow. And again, you know, I don't know. It really should say between. So we're at 4 with a -1 because there's skirmishers between us to the die roll. And we roll a total of 4. On the 4, we do a casualty. Now, there's a couple of ways to mark that casualty. One of them is to find the right sheet. This is LON. Find the right unit. We were firing at the V117-1C, I think. Okay, that's not a good way to find it. We go by the number 53. 53 is over here, and that takes a casualty, and I gotta find a pencil for that. Because you can regain stragglers, and everything is kind of stragglers in this game. So we'll mark that off. Okay, and this was the 17th Leger. Why do I see that 17th? Maybe that's LG. Okay. So, I think that's the extent of the defensive fire because I can't shoot at the skirmishers. Now, I believe you add up fire. Yeah. You must combine their firepower. So, the question then becomes, oh, I've got a morale check to make. Is the morale of this thing? It's got a 9 morale. And it survives. The other way of marking losses would be to mark them directly on the units. I'm a little worried about the number of counters I have. That has always been kind of an issue here. And maybe that's why I should just use the number counters instead of these things, but I don't know what these things are for, if not, you know, to perform as a cloud of skirmishers. There just aren't enough, is the only problem. I guess if I piece them together from different battles. Okay. So now we get the attack fire. And here the question is, do I want to be rolling a 1 in 6 chance or two 1 in 6 chances or a 2 in 6 chance? I think the 2 in 6 chance is better. But is it? The 2 in 6 chance has a very clear 2 in 6 chance of doing 1 hit. The 1 in 6 chance actually has to be better because I could conceivably do 2 hits. Right? See, but it's not exactly additive. I don't know. It depends on what you want to wipe out. But here I'm going to go for 1 in 6. Hey, wow. Okay, so I got to find that unit and figure out which track that is. should be over here. Who are we talking about? 66. Grenadiers, interesting. Okay. And I'll just continue on and give a report. I don't know why. I guess maybe because I've done so little playing, I feel like, oh, I should be videoing everything. But, you know, this is pretty mechanical. There's a problem. Firing into the town is not pleasant in general. It's got a -2 to the effect on the fire combat. The most I could do is put two of these against that. So that's not worth firing at. Firing at artillery. That's an interesting question. I don't know how that works. I know that fire on artillery has an optional rule or an advanced rule or something or another. Maybe both. I mean, if it's an optional rule, it's an advanced rule, right? I think that's only artillery on artillery losses. Okay. So here I'd be firing 2 at this artillery, which seems like infantry is very effective against artillery. Skirmishers especially. Looking for the chart that I had. Is it on the other side of here? Yeah. And that means a 5 or a 6 will hit. Yeah, that seems extreme. Okay. So that's all the French firepower, and I think that gets me to melee. Not sure what the requirements for melee are. You can attack enemy units that are adjacent. Yeah, so very much like Terrible Swift Sword type games. Do I want to? Well, that's a good question. We have a melee value, which is the little red number that's not in a square. So I have a 2 to a 2. You know, not really. Seems like a bad idea to me. Just seems that way. So I'm not going to declare a melee there. I don't know how well I just did. I feel like I probably should have launched my units more directly, but I chose to skirmish first. You know, it gives me the advantage in that the Prussians can't really shoot back, but. All right, and that is going to put me on the Prussian turn, and it's time for another break. I'll put a couple Prussian dice here at the 6 a.m. turn to remind me. First thing that I did, feels like I'm being shelled here. It's the big weights of snow falling. At least there aren't trees this time. Is the charge phase. And I left the French trailing something within cav range. This is problematic. So I'm going to declare a cav charge against it. Cav gets into line formation because of that. No. There's different movement point costs for cav charge. Clear is fine. And we're not going up any hills or anything. So we should be okay. We're allowed to make a limited number of 60-degree moves. I think 2 of them within the course. We could be tricky and try to curve around. I'm not going to do that because the slope is too expensive for me to be able to handle that. I'd be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't remember what. Did I get my full damn movement allowance? I don't remember. Certainly it would be advantageous of me to do that. So let's see. Let's say I was facing this way, so I can face this way. 1, 2, 3. I believe that makes the tirailleurs run away. This is where the system gets difficult, and it often is the case with the cav charges, the melees, all the interactions here. In this system in NBS, a little different in Wellington's Victory. You declare your charge kind of by... It still is the most complicated part of the system, but here I'm doing much as I did in 2 minutes to midnight, having to flip between different sections of the rules to find things. When an enemy cav enters adjacent to a Voltigeur, it disintegrates. Okay, so I was here, 1, 2, 3. This is gone. I'll worry about it later. 4, 5. Looking to see if I have facing costs printed anywhere. I think it's just a normal movement point. Ugh. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, I believe countercharge range is 2. Let me just make sure I did that right. I'll be looking up some rules and come back. I was wrong. Countercharge is actually 1, but I believe there's a rule that I did not go look up that allows light cav, like this guy, to do a countercharge of 2. And that would have just spoiled this whole attack, so I would have just come straight in, because that's better. Now, an infantry can be in square at the start of the charge or can attempt to form square at any time at the charge. I would have done it once we were here. I would be trying to create, because the target had to be announced. In order to do this, you make a morale check with a -2 from the back. Nope. And here's where we get weird here. The troops from the last rank always look behind from time to time. The contrary would be surprising, and the square was formed no matter where the order was issued from. But there's a penalty. I don't understand, but I understand what's intended for the rule, I think. But I don't understand some of the verbiage that's been included for no reason. So I'm back here somewhere, and I'm going to try to create the square. The cav may get a chance to, may make a break and try not to go into the square. If the distance is 3 hexes or more, a bonus of 1 applies. So I could actually have done it further back. Now, I had to declare, when did I have to declare that I'm entering square? Or when did I have to declare my target is the question. During his charge phase, which units, but he does not state what's targeted. Only 260 degree. Ooh, each costs 2. Hold on. That may not work. Let's go back here. We were like this. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, we're not going to be able to. So we'll be coming straight in. And without a target declared, that means we'll be doing, let's get this here. We'll be going like this. 1, I'm going to try to create square with both of these. I'm not, do I care about this? See, the square gets rid of, yeah, I'm going to just try with both of those. Because I'll get so much firepower with other things, and it doesn't really hurt me to create squares there. So, we go back to the square, and what do? We're at a distance of 3 hexes, so we've got a bonus of 1 to our morale. Line of sight is important here. It might be important. Okay. These are visible. So that gives him a morale of 10. Does create his square. We indicate that like this. I think the Voltiger goes away. Those aren't lights, so that's fine. Put that there. And the other guy is also a 10. He also forms square. Now that leaves me with an interesting situation where I could continue a charge against this, which might have a lesser chance of forming square. I'm not going to be facing a whole hell of a lot of fire. Let's try that. What did we do? We're at 2. This is 3. I ought to be tracking movement points somehow. 3. We'll try to create square there. This is not at +1. This is standard. He fails. Okay. If morale check fails, the infantry is disorganized but does not retreat now. Okay. This is turn 1. And I believe we mark its disorganization this way. And now we continue in against the disorganized infantry and charge there. And that gets rid of these Voltigers as well. Okay. This gets resolved in the melee step. I think that's the only charge that I'm going to do. This is infantry actually here, sitting in the village, holding the flank here with the infantry. I wasn't expecting Cav to run around this way. I don't know why. It's really not that dangerous since I've got a flank anchored. The big thing was to be able to disrupt the advance in that fashion. Okay. That will get us now to regular movement. Now, as regards regular movement, again, things aren't really well defined as to what you can and can't do in terms of movement when you're in a defend type position. Let me scan over those rules again, but what I think I'm going to be doing is I am going to be allowing the Prussians to form up their line, even if it means advancing, because it doesn't make sense to allow an enemy to bring a cloud of skirmishers and throw them in front of you and not be taunted by them, right? If anything, it would be kind of hard to force the subordinate commanders to stand there and take that fire if you can't do anything about it. On the other hand, this guy could, I think, throw one out that way, although I'm not sure they're allowed to throw. So here's the weird thing. I thought they're only allowed to throw them out their front hexes. Maybe not if it's anchored, I don't know. But this guy actually has skirmishers. These guys do not. Therefore, he would be able to put it into one of these front hexes, but there are units that have 3 skirmishers. There's no line formation that allows you to have three front-facing hexes. Maybe you're allowed to have 3 skirmishers in column formation, and I'll have to look and see how that's worded. But it may also be that you're allowed to fling them out your side, which wouldn't surprise me either. Command and control is in effect on this map. Not on this one, we'll get to that very shortly. Which means, as per the 3rd level of command and control, units are not allowed to move if they're out of command. There's no corps leader here. They're not allowed to voluntarily leave the hex they're in. So we're kind of being surprise attacked here, is what it comes down to. And that's going to last for like, I don't know, like 3 hours, 6 turns, something like that, because Hohenlohe, 2 hours, 4 turns. Hohenlohe doesn't come in until 8? Let's see. Well, no, until he arrives, which I think is at 9. No, 8. Okay. And whether or not they can be in command otherwise, I don't know either, because again, there's no commander on the board. Like, there's no corps commander over there. In fact, I don't know if there are corps commanders. Fuck. Like, I get this, and I get nothing else. Oh, okay. Hohenlohe counts as the corps commander for all his units, which I think means they're all going to have to fall back to him, which is pretty screwy too. And probably not what is intended at all. But it is a consequence of the rules. However, light units, which this counts as one of, are allowed to throw a Voltigern, or Vartigern, out and deploy it in any surrounding hex. Regular units can only deploy to the front. So I'm going to be kind of stuck in this I can't trade fire position. I'm not allowed to leave my hex. That's what I think this says. See, I'm paging through. Here's the problem. Not only do I have to page through several areas of this rule book, but I got to page through several areas of this. And that is not really a consequence of the Auerstaedt, me making up a scenario. It's because some of the special rules are on the scenario itself. Some of them are in the back of this book. And you gotta kind of combine these things. And yeah, I couldn't have charged. Right? Well, we got to see what a charge would have looked like. Thick fog. Maximum cavalry charge 2 hexes. Let's get rid of all this shit. Get these back here, I guess. Get rid of this die. Whoops. Good thing I went off on that tangent. Get all of my dudes up here. And the question is, what am I allowed and not allowed to do? Well, what did these say? Defense order, retreat order. Yeah, this is something else. Okay. Well, one thing. Is it only charge it? I don't want to sidle my cav up within range that infantry can march up and start shooting it. On the other hand, if infantry marches up and starts shooting it, the cav can countercharge, and that's not particularly good either. Okay, we got to think here. See, that 2 hex charge range is really, really painful against line formed infantry, and I am trying to consider. Oh, I'm not allowed to move these units. Never mind. Never mind. They're allowed to charge. Charge is not considered movement. Okay. So that's what I've got. So they're allowed to defend the line. And that's about all I've got. Unless I want to, say, rotate an artillery piece. That would open up a flank to fire. I don't think that's wise, but I don't know. I really don't know. The definition of flanking is in here somewhere, because here's the thing. I think if I do this, this might be anchoring that flank, even though it's turned all weird. Again, this game has some really, really odd concepts. Okay. I don't know where facing is. Flank attacks are described on 8.6. And this is where they have that protected flank thing. You know, it's just got a lot of stuff in it, and some of it has to do with the way facing is, these 2 hex facings and stuff, instead of with your normal, you know, well, I'm not going to say normal. I'm going to say with your Terrible Swift sword-based games, which a lot of things are, you face a hex side, and so you have 3 front-facing hexes, and that interlocks a lot better. When you start dealing with this protected flank, if a friendly unit is attacked by an enemy unit Y through the flank or rear can be protected if Y is in front of friendly unit Z, except if Z is limbered artillery or disorganized. So this has front hexes in all directions, so doing this would get me a better shot on some closer units, and it will not expose me to flank fire. Okay. So that's all I can really do on this map. On this map, okay. Now we look for the fog rules again. Cavalry, maximum of 6 movement points, and we have this. I guess I want to try to threaten the line. I don't have a fucking clue. One way I might have some further information that would be useful is if I go back to the Auerstaedt battle, which is this one, I think. 630, I'm getting a unit at Popel. More cav up here. I don't know how much that helps me. I don't know how much it doesn't. I've got heavier cav against a light cav. You'd think that would be helpful on the melee situation. And it may be. There may be an advanced rule. There's some rule, and I think it's an advanced rule, that deals with the different weights of cav. Here we go. When heavy cav charges, it gets a +1 and less against heavy cav. Line cav also gets a +1 against light cav. So I actually have a better situation. So 1, 2, you get free facing changes on the road. 3, 4. I think we'll try to scare that cav away. I move here, I get countercharged, and that's not good, because I'm not allowed to countercharge a countercharge, if I recall correctly. I don't remember. Oh wait, we've got opportunity charge. What's this? This is like a countercharge, but only if the enemy unit becomes adjacent to a front hex of the countercharging unit. At that time, there's an empty hex between them. What? This is only light cav, so it's not really a case. After a morale check for countercharging, it advances, and then the opportunity charge is resolved as yeah, that's just the further distance countercharge, which I do not have. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can't countercharge a countercharge. You can countercharge a retreat. But countercharging a countercharge sounds weird to me. Let's move this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get them together. Sure. All right. That map's done. This map's done, I guess. And we're on defensive fire, and we had a lot less of interest happen because the fog means I couldn't charge. Okay. We're going to stop there for a while. Let me put some gray dice if I can find them here to remind me whose turn I'm stopping in the middle of. And, you know, with all the rules lookups, and it really, because this system has these weirdnesses to it compared to most systems, you know, honestly, because it's Napoleonic, I really think that that's the key factor here. Because if you think about it, Wellington's Victory has a bunch of weird rules in it, handling the cav. The NBS series goes way out of its way. It integrates, well, melee becomes a lot more important, but it integrates movement in melee, but you have to look up a lot of shit. Certainly the Labatt, I was just devastated by that. Yeah, in terms of like the level of lookups that I have to make. It's the cost of not playing simple American Civil War stuff, I guess. I enjoy this stuff. It's just the learning curve is always very high when I'm facing these types of things. And I think it's going to be the same when I'm looking at like the musket and pike. You know, when I go back to that, it took me a while to learn it the first time, but I was so excited that, you know, it didn't feel as costly as relearning a system. Always painful to me. Remembered that I forgot is the fatigue rules. Since Lan's troops marched, he gets a fatigue marker. Now, this is more complicated if you don't have a commander because there's no corps. Maybe Hohenlohe's collecting them or something. I don't know. I can't move those things. They can't get fatigued that way, but they can get them from attacking in melee. So, yeah, I don't know. I will allow attacking in melee and record the fatigue as needed. Anyway, that was from back on the French turn. Going back to the Prussian turn where I am, I'm going to engage in the defensive fire, and I'll do the offensive too. I'll come back, and we'll see what we got. Screwed up. I fired this at this, didn't count in the artillery, but honestly, I don't know if I want it to count in the artillery, because that would move me from the 4 up to the 7+, so I'm losing some firepower capability, so I fired at this anyway. Missed. The only hit that happened from anyone was on that one unit, and it's marked. No morale effect. Now, that puts me to the choice of a melee phase. Now, these get me kind of disturbed, and I think before I was marking them using just hash marks and such not, and I may switch to that. This is the official way you're supposed to do it. Again, I'm not sure that there are enough number counters for this whole battle, but certainly there are at this point. So what do we have? Well, we have one melee opportunity, to tell you the truth. I could launch an attack here. It would disrupt my line, and although the French didn't want a melee, I don't think the Prussians particularly want to either. It's going to give them a fatigue point. It's not that big a deal. You know, it's every 5 that's a problem. So, you know, that's not a huge issue. And that'll throw me to the rally phase. There's nothing disordered, I think. See, this is where this confuses me. It looks disordered. So I'm like, this would have been, had that cav charge happen, even if I didn't manage to do anything to it, it would fall back a couple of hexes because it got disordered trying to make the square. It would have also suffered the charge, but with the thick fog, we can't do that. And speaking of the thick fog that we just forgot about entirely, let's take a look at it because I bet you I forgot other stuff. Artillery firepower is divided by 2. Screw it. I may have gotten a hit that I wasn't supposed to. But yeah, I missed that. Okay. And maximum range is 2 hexes. So yeah, that's going to put me on the next turn. And I'll put these dice over here to remind me on this side. Over here, I've got a pile of... looks like Sewell is coming in. Now that'll come in, I believe, back there from the same direction, which kind of confused me. I thought these guys kind of slipped in behind, but when I look at, and I'm sorry for how this is going, it's the way it is. French reinforcements, Naumburg. Okay, that's not here. I don't know where Naumburg is. Is it way up here? Well, that's Auerstaedt. Gera. Dornberg. Uh-oh. I don't know where Naumburg is. They enter on the map by the road of Naumburg. Well, am I on the right battle? No, that's Auerstaedt. All right. Yeah, I think this is Jena that these come in on. Road to Gera. Gera? Gera. Looks like Jena when I saw it before, that's why. And this is Jena, so you know. It's close enough now. Yeah, so they're just going to be pushing in through here. So here's the problem. They don't have orders. They should. They should have orders. And I'll write them some, but this is actually an issue. So again, games where orders are pre-written make a lot more sense to me, where there's sort of a historical set of orders for reinforcements coming in. NBS always has that. It's going to be obnoxious in this game to kind of cope with those types of orders, you know, because theoretically what I would have had to do is I would have to write all the orders for all the units as they're before they enter at the beginning of the game. That hasn't been done. Maybe I will try to do that. But yeah, for the most part, that's probably the solution that's intended, as opposed to, I mean, obviously they're not just going to wander on and do nothing. They've got some orders to get them to the battlefield. And given that, you know, well then, what does Napoleon give them as orders beyond that? I don't know. And what I may do is go with some kind of default orders to like march them, you know, up to somewhere like Cospeda or something that'll take them a couple of turns to get to. But here's the problem with all that. I probably should have orders for some of the later units to deal with more flanking and not just pile everything up in one area, which would be really, really obnoxious, to tell you the truth. So maybe I will pre-write orders for all of the damn units. Again, usually I'm used to the NBS CWB series where it's like, here's the historical orders. Now, you did not have to stay with them, but by giving them, you get kind of the what would have been the order. You know, what were the orders that kind of give you a position where troops come on the board and station themselves somewhere reasonable. I will probably try to do orders along those kinds. So like if I'm thinking some force wants to head up here or head down here, I will position that force in striking distance, but without the committed attack orders, so that they can start their movement there, and then Napoleon can send orders to them as they enter the board to get them on the board. But yeah, it's an irritation, because the way I like it to work out with those pre-written orders, when I come to them in the description of the reinforcements, that's when I add them to my rule book, to my orders sheet, so that I don't have like, I don't know, how many corps are there here? You know, let's see, 1, 2, 3. 5 or 6 corps. I think these are all present here. So yeah, 6 corps. The Cav, of course, are completely autonomous, and you can do whatever you like with, which feels a little funky to me, but okay. You know, it gives them a lot of flexibility in terms of intervening in the battle where they need to be. Let's get a few more turns in before I load this up, I guess. I don't know. It just feels like I've done so little so far. On both maps, we have an issue. I wrote out my orders for the early morning corps, at least. I'm not worried about Urschel yet. He'll probably have orders to come onto the map, and Bernadotte as well, who comes in way late. I'm just assuming they'll have orders to kind of head towards their army commander and await further orders, because they're so far in the future. Urschel comes in at noon, so 6 hours later, 12 turns, and Bernadotte, I don't know, like 1500 or something like that. So 3 p.m. But Hohenlohe comes on the map, and they say you can use any level of orders that you want. Well, let's take a look at what they say about Hohenlohe here. Okay, these are these. Any level of command and control. Any Prussian units are out of command until the arrival of Hohenlohe. He is the army and corps commander for all initial on-board forces. Well, this is kind of weird because we must have another one of these kicking around somewhere. There it is. Yes, I know it says Hohenlohe Army on here. This is the consolidated Prussian army. However, I need this one for Davout, so I was going to keep the main Prussian army over here. But yeah, this one I don't need yet. Well, I may. Hohenlohe, though, has all of this force, I guess, with Urschel coming in later. Now, what they say is he's the army and corps commander. His corps command radius is 6 while under March tactical orders. Well, what the fuck is that? See, that's not really an order on level 4, right? That's like a level 3 order. That those kinds of orders, I think, get withdrawn when you move, I think. You know, so I guess they mean March, not March tactical. There's no March tactical. Oh no, tactical orders. Okay, March. The units can move only in column or general order. No attack is allowed. But But there's nothing really like that. Oh yeah, there are. There's the tactics here. Okay. So as long as I'm not giving him, and I haven't been distinguishing them in my orders, I've been, whatever. But okay, so while on march tactical orders, what is this? 1 unit each from the 1st and 2nd Division can act independently. 1st and 2nd Division are one of these two forces. I think that one over there. This is just kind of weird. He can't create a provisional corps. He has to kind of move around and gather his forces, as far as I can tell. I might be able to declare some kind of general retreat or something. I'll have to look at the orders rules to see if there's anything like that. But yeah, you normally don't start with a corps all spread all over hell and creation like this. Again, there should be commanders in charge of these things, as far as I'm concerned. You know, but it's meant to represent some sort of massive disorganization. So there you have it. But that means for a majority of the battle, well, really for all of the battle, Hohenlohe is the army commander. Does he write himself orders and see if he accepts them? You know, if not, he's lightning fast, which doesn't really seem terribly good, except that he's got this disorganized situation. So maybe he'd be a really good commander if he can only get his forces together. That feels weird, but okay. On the other hand, Davout is also the army commander of the French over here at Auerstaedt, and the corps commander. I'm a lot more comfortable with Davout being able to just kind of ignore command and control restrictions, but they don't say anything like that. And I don't think that there's anything about, what if the army commander is the only corps commander? You know, there's not a special rule for that I'm aware of, having seen. Now, maybe it's in special rules for this scenario. The French army has an orthodox structure. In scenarios including Davout, he starts with an attack order. Then we get here, Hohenlohe and Brunswick are army commanders. They can issue one order per turn, but see special rule on Brunswick's fate. Yeah, well, Brunswick has a chance of just getting shot because that disrupts his army further. What they don't talk about is, what is this special status of being both army and corps commander? And if we look, this will probably be under the 3rd level rules, because that's where army leaders take place. Now, the other option is Davout is only operable with Napoleon, but that doesn't work because Auerstaedt is a standalone battle as well, right? It does not require orders from Napoleon to operate on this map if you're playing just the Auerstaedt scenario, and that uses standard command and control restrictions. So, but they don't even say he's an army commander. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's any discussion. If an army commander is stacked, well, here it is. If an army commander is stacked with his subordinates, the order is immediately transmitted and automatically obeyed. No die roll is made. I believe there's a 1-turn delay in reality, because immediately means 1 turn, if I understand here. During the first turn, all units and all leaders are under command, but not. But yeah, that's a special rule. Here it is. Obeying orders is not until you hit 4th level, which is weird because you'd think 5th level or 3rd level would have it as well. So they have an obedience value, and a success check. And on a full success, the order takes place on the next turn. So you can't do, let's see about initiative. Whenever the result, the effects will take place the next turn. So yeah, again, it takes, you can never write an order for the turn you're going to use it. When do you write orders? Yeah, I don't know. Damned if I know. Probably that's a third level order rule. You send them, these are sent. The leader no longer needs to be the army commander. Allowance. Yeah, I don't know. There's a specific, again, and the NBS series has a specific orders writing and orders acceptance structure and everything. Here it's just kind of like, yeah, fit it in, make do. You don't need rules for all of this. And, I probably made it kind of following the NBS structure because of that. But there's just such a loose attitude towards the writing of rules in this series, which, again, as I mentioned in earlier incarnations of it, is since my first ones were AWE, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm used to out of AWE. I'm a little surprised that Legion didn't buckle down and ask for a little bit more, but they're a small company, and trying to impose additional development tasks on something that has its own popularity, has its own market already built in. Like with A World at War and GMT, it's like, yeah, I could probably shop this somewhere else if I really had to. Yeah. All right. Take the moment, actually, because this came to mind. One of the reasons I'm stumbling so hard is I know how bad these rules are and how weak they are ahead of time. And it's kind of like, I know that I'm not going to find the necessary answers all the time. I know that I'm not going to be able to remember them nor where they are because of the organization of the rules. So it's just a cost to dealing with this system is, yeah, if you're not really familiar with using it heavily, you're gonna stumble around with it quite a bit, and maybe come up with answers that you don't agree with later on as you're playing. So, Speaking of orders and whatnot, since I did not get, I went out of my way, wrote up all the orders for all the French reinforcements that are coming in. Hohenlohe has to kind of observe the scene to give any orders, I guess. I don't know. The structure of whatever the hell he has is so nonsensible to me, that it just doesn't fit in well with the orders system. It's like, I almost feel like I wasn't playing a written orders game at this point, because I don't feel like there's this support for it, but we'll see how it plays out. And because he's going to have to run to locations and take those units each into command. That's the only way he can do things. Now, he's the army commander. There's no subordinate in any of those places. He's not even allowed to create what are called provisional corps, which I don't know how you send them orders. I don't think they're covered in the order system, but okay. I think, I don't know. But in all of that, I forgot about somebody who's actually on the board and needs some sort of orders. And this is somewhat problematic because, again, so this scenario says no one needs any orders, but at some point he's going to have to just accept orders. So I guess it's okay that he doesn't have any right now. And it's kind of fucked up because for the morning scenario, and I'm trying to play those victory conditions, there have to be, like, I don't even remember. It's like no non-disordered units. outside the villages or something along those lines. I hope it's non-disordered, because anything worse would be even tougher. That's going to be really difficult. I mean, obviously, this isn't the only Prussian unit that comes on during the time period. We see a lot more show up. But, geez, man, you know, it's all Cav. It's going to have a hard time busting up that line. You know, units form into square, and right away you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to attack that anymore. I might blow my Cav, which is essentially a disorder in this game. All right, I guess we get started and I try to figure out what the hell I'm doing. The first questions is, it's this whole, how do I manipulate my units properly, right? That really is the big barrier that's in front of me with this game. And honestly, again, that's not dealing with simple situations. But here, it is a little simple. You know, I've got these skirmishers out front. Is that the level of engagement I want, or do I need to push more? You know, the level of engagement that I have with my skirmishers out is, you can't hurt me and I can hurt you, which to me is like, you know, that's the ideal, man. Why would I want to change that? Well, maybe I'm in a hurry. You know? That's the kind of thing that's hard for me to really understand. And is this, yeah, this is the road to Auerstaedt. So if I can bust this army up quickly enough, I could just march on and make it to Auerstaedt, and, you know, maybe trap the main Prussian army in that way. So maybe, maybe we push harder. If we push harder, we build up fatigue, we have to rest, but the next column coming up might be in good shape. The point where the game's mechanisms, and this is just the truth with all of these Napoleonic games, and not maybe so much with even earlier eras where, so I'm thinking the musket and pike era here in particular. But anyway, what I've done is I started here and I marched the line forward. Now this has just gotten not quite into range. It's just about to go into range where it can be countercharged. I kind of can't afford to. Because I can't countercharge. My moving those guys up did not protect me. So we'll leave this here. Can't move any closer here. I can move closer here. Yeah. And makes sense to try to assault the village. It's very, very hard to get somebody out of a village. Makes sense to put more pressure on the artillery. Makes sense to bring some of these skirmishers up. Over here, I think I'm going to wait a little bit. Push this out. And let's see, I got room. I could throw another one out here without any problem. Moved my cav up. Enough units have moved that I've gotten up to a 2 fatigue level. If I decide to do any melees, that'll go up to a 3. Once it breaks 5, we start having some issues. I'll bring my reinforcements on and then go deal with Davout. We should talk about Davout starting to deploy into squares. As far as I can tell for this fog scenario, hey, that's perfect. You know, that prevents anything bad from happening, basically. I don't think that's a winnable scenario by the Prussians, and I think, you know, if you look at the historical results, they end up battering their cav. I'll have to look at the special rules because Blucher, I believe, is forced to charge things, so I may want to withdraw back, but I can't withdraw too far because I've got to screen my units. So I may end up disordering all my units anyway, just as they historically were. I did the Prussian fire here, and we got a couple of kills. A hit here, 2 hits here, but now we're on the French fire. And the thing with the Voltigeur version of skirmishers, and this may be true with the Trialer as well, is you kind of get a maximum of 1 from the skirmishers. So like, I couldn't combine these 2 and get a 2 on this, but I could combine this with this and get fire. That's not going to be flanking fire because it's anchored, whatever. It's very hard to get flanking fire in this game. Most games, you feel like it's too easy, and you got to make some twiddles to make it a little bit harder. In this game, there's almost well, you're just not going to get it very often. If there's anything like support nearby, it's really, really hard. Which means the lines don't have to be as solid as they look like they are. Not necessarily, right? So the flanking fire on this unit is interfered with by this unit over here. So you can have gaps in your line. That's a little different from from the kind of support that you're used to in other designs, I would say. So yeah, I have to make my decision, do I want to fire 4 into there? And by the way, no matter how many hits you take, unless you're disordered or something, your firepower remains the same, because you got the same frontage there, essentially, as long as there's anything of a unit left. So yeah, the question is whether I want to do a 1 against this or a 5 against this is really the thing. And you look at the table, you're like, I would say the 5 is definitely a better option. Well, it's a 5 versus a 4, but yeah. Running into a painful, I just fired these guys both into the artillery. That leaves me with 3 strength points. -2 is 1 against this village. I could throw these guys in and get it to 2. With the morale check advantages, etc., I don't know if I want to do that. I think the big thing I need to do is get into position where I can charge those cav. But that's a 2 hex range right now. I wasn't able to get that close. Next turn, I will not be that close. I'll be able to move forward, but still not be able to be close enough to do it. They may countercharge me, or not. I don't know. But yeah, so the problem with artillery is I remember a rule. I don't know where I'm finding it because I've spent some time, maybe 5 minutes looking. That's about my tolerance generally. So what I think happens is that only 1 hit is absorbed by the artillery, and the next hit goes down to the infantry they're embedded with. 1 hit halves that artillery. It's a pretty potent hit anyway. But I can't find that here. What I'm wondering about is maybe it's sitting in here. Attack from a flank or year of the combat. Any 0 or 1 is replaced by D, all other combat. Yeah, that's not what I remember it being. See, I seem to remember something about this, and then there's also the who takes the morale check on it. I think in this game the top unit still takes it, but I'm not positive of that. Over in NBS, the infantry always takes, well, in CWB, but probably NBS, the infantry always takes the morale check. In fact, they take the losses too, but unless it's artillery firing. And I can't find any such rule here. When you have embedded artillery like that, it's pretty hard to pick off the crew, and I'm not thrilled if I can't find this rule. The problem, I mean, fire doesn't tell you a whole hell of a lot, right? Tells you what the firepower is. I don't even know if it tells you to roll on the chart or anything like that. Yeah. So here you first have several, roll a die. Then the result on the fire table chart. Any step loss is an immediate morale check. A star means it checks morale anyway. There's an exception. Town or castle doesn't check morale. I'm not seeing a damn thing here. And then we go to the next thing. We go offensive, defensive fire. That doesn't tell me anything. Opportunity fire is the next thing we go to. Blocking terrains, losses. Players can choose to use, fire against square, looking to see if there's anything special, and then we run out. The only other place I can think it could be, and I think I've checked this, but again, my brain turns to mush when I'm faced with mushy rules. Okay, my brain turns to mush often. So artillery, we're not worried about limbered, we're worried about unlimbered. Movement is 0. All kind of stuff about movement, can pivot, range dependent on fire value. This is if it's firing, nothing about that. This is again firing back. Place a numeric loss for the disorder. Use the printed morale. Oh, shit. Yeah, we don't have any disorders. This is fatigue. Not seeing anything here that affects anything. Maybe stacking. Stacking in combat, only top unit can fire. All the units take place, exception. If a unit's melee is 0, it doesn't take part in the melee. If unlimited artillery attack through 0 doesn't. Stacking and losses. Always top unit, except during melee. Top unit might not be in. If it's completely eliminated, we go through to the next. In the rare cases where the top unit is artillery and the fire comes from the flank or rear, the guns are ignored. So this may be the only special rule. Yeah. So if you want your artillery to fire, you have to have it stacked on top. I was firing at range 2. I can change the stacking very shortly, but not yet. So I've just taken 2 hits on this artillery. That is the entirety of the gun crew. If we look, this may be a 3-step one. There are a few. If we look at 71, now it's a 2-step artillery. And so we have lost this unit. And I believe it has no chance to come back. That would make sense, it's guns, but there are cases where units in the game can recover stragglers by sitting. I don't know if that's in the fatigue rules or somewhere else in the optional rules. Seem to remember a straggler recovery rule. Again, and now I'm in orders, and I thought orders is kind of the end of this. Now we got strategic deployment, unit deployment, and that's all strategic deployment. Time limit penalties, interactive. So I'm not seeing that right away. So now I'm going to have to look for that and refresh myself. And I can't use it yet, but I want to know if it's there. You know, this is kind of the problem. I remember reading something about recovering strength points. Now, I'm pretty sure you can't recover destroyed units of any kind. And destroyed artillery would especially make sense because they're abandoning guns. Although, the optional rules, somewhere in them have, when you retreat, when you get a disorder result with artillery, it actually just sits there and they can capture the guns, which is a little screwy because then there's gun crews running around who presumably could actually man other guns, but I don't think there's any rules to handle that. it would be hard to integrate and get them where they belong, but it should be a possibility, I guess, if you're going to start going to that level of detail. I don't know. Strangely enough, this is under section 16. What the fuck is that? Optional roles. Great. There's troops reintegration, which is kind of mixed in with all kind of morale stuff. If you're in good order out of fire range of an enemy with a leader on it and did not move and already took losses, you can try to recover a loss during a rally phase. This is not an easy thing to do. You need to have a leader on you, which means basically you pulled the unit back and you're trying to recover it completely out of things. Still got another fire left here. So I destroyed artillery. That was easy. Much easier than it should be. Here I could fire 1, 2. Why don't we do that? See, the real question is, would I rather pick at this? Yeah, let's just do a 1 on that thing because we're so unlikely to hit the village. And then a 1 on this one down here as well. Okay. That's just a 5. That's not going to do it. I think that covers the offensive fire. Now I got to make the big decision. Do I want to melee? See, the problem with melee is that it costs me another fatigue point. It tires my units out further. And a little bit of a removable tape, which doesn't really do the job, but because it's removable, so the force separates it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be safe. So yeah, that's a big question. Now, what about villages? Because I'm sitting there outside a village in a position. Village in melee. The attacker loses 2 off his melee value. Now we got to look here and try to see how to read this thing. Melee value is the little red number underneath the big red number. So we'd be looking at a 4 to a 3 without the ability to get a morale check on it. If we look at the melee table, 4 to 3 would get me on 1 to 1. There's no leaders involved. Yeah, I should bring Lan up to charge the town. With no morale checks over here, I think overall it's just not a good thing. If I can get the odds up good enough attacking from many different areas at once, it's probably worth it. But I don't think I want to push into the town at this point. Would I want to push into, say, here? Well, there we'd be looking at that same kind of 4 to 3 odds. The Prussians are better at melee. Did we get better? I was thinking maybe in column. Might have a little bit of an advance. You have, I think, a morale check bonus or something like that. Melee, value +1. Really? And that's not written on the actual unit? I find that very, very disturbing. Because the firepower value decreases there. Wow, I've got to look this up because that disturbs me. Infantry column. The melee value, yeah, okay, because it only applies when you're attacking, yeah. So I could convert to column and attack, but I think I'm better off firing in line at this point. And I think that puts us to the Prussian side of the turn here. We got some reinforcements coming, and it's time for a break. can see, and again, it has more, some of it has to do with the loose organization of the rules, but it has a lot to do with how Napoleonic combat is simulated, not just in this system, but in all systems, where it is more fatiguing to do this kind of thing. And there are more rules you have to look up, and more special cases you have to be aware of all the time, to be able to cope with and start to learn how to use your units properly. I have some of the base ideas, behind in the back of my mind. I know, you use the cav to charge, or at least threaten, force squares to be formed, bombard that with artillery, maybe fire some infantry into that, and use the combined arms to your best advantage. But the ways to make the cav charge especially effective have to make it a much more interactive aspect of the game. And the funny thing is, this, I think Labatt, Wellington's Victory, NBS, maybe not things like the Berg system for Napoleonics. I don't remember. I get the feeling that kind of works because of the chit pull, where you might get, where you might get the order right, where you can declare a charge with a cav formation, and then you can use another formation to bust the infantry up. But it kind of doesn't work because there might be gaps where, like, oh look, I formed square. Oh look, I unsquare. I form line again, and there's never a chance to really take advantage of it in the same way. So these more interactive systems work better for me for that. I don't really remember the OSG stuff really covering the combined arms very effectively either. So they have two different sets. They have the Library of Napoleonic Battles, which is really based on the old Napoleon at Waterloo system. And I don't remember any kind of formations being available there. And then they have the more operational stuff where, again, cav doesn't have much impact. It's just faster moving. And you can use it for scouting and stuff like that as the system got more and more mature. It always felt both systems feel very kind of lightweight compared to this. But anyway, there's just this heavy cost, which I find kind of weird. Like musket and pike, I didn't remember having that same kind of problem in place. But when I think about that, you don't have the square formation in that, if I recall correctly. The big deal there was with the commands that the different units were using, and the cav could put pressure on you as you were locked in front by the infantry and whatnot. But the cav was not the kind of arm that it is here. And then also in the couple of games that I have from, I don't know what to call it, Age of Reason, I guess. Well, see, by the time you get to Frederick, I think the cav is becoming more and more effective. But if you're looking at like Great Northern War and stuff in that era and Spanish Succession, the cav is still kind of more like it is in musket and pike, and not as influential, not as capable of working in the same combined arms type way. So I think there's the decision that yes, it still is powerful, but it's not. It doesn't have to be as interactive. So Napoleonic is sort of this very particular period where bringing all three of the arms into play in a particular way makes sense, and they have to be really kind of integrated more. It would work in the earlier periods, presumably. It's just that level of tactical system wasn't in play yet to the same level. All right. Anyway, enough chatter. Okay. Continuing on to the Prussian side of the tournament, I think we'll load up after this. I basically, I'm just watching news on YouTube, kind of like I do in the background when I'm working. But I feel like I'm spending more time sitting in my chair doing that. I haven't even read, which most of these days I've been reading fiction rather than doing anything else. But anyway, I pushed forward here because I want to be in range to charge these cav. I've got heavier cav. That'll probably force Davu to pull them back, but because of the heavy fog, I couldn't just charge them. I've got to line that charge up within a couple of hexes before I go forward. No idea what happens if the French start throwing units for me to charge, because with the Blucher rule, I think I have to do so. But whatever to that. But over here, I started thinking, I wanted to look up the special rules on the scenario. I wanted to look up something. I don't remember what. I really don't remember what I was looking at. But I flipped to this scenario, and I found something in the command and control. Use a maximum CNC level. Okay. Maximum is 5, which is like you need separate people to command each thing, and they're pretty much free to do whatever they want. So that's a little weird. 4 is the one that I'm most closely using. I just can't use 5, but I'm not sure that there's any reason for this scenario where for the entirety of it, like, I'm not looking at the general Jena one. I'm looking at the opening moves one to see if there was anything special about that I wanted to deal about. Command and control, use the maximum CNC. Well, it kind of doesn't make sense when there's one leader on the Prussian side, and the French should have pretty decent command and control in this scenario, that you'd want the maximal, the level 5, which is like the one that is no system at all, right? It's a little iffy why you'd want the level 4 in particular, but whatever. I think you'd want at least level 3. Right? Level 3 is the tactical orders. That makes sense. Although, again, I don't see why in particular with this scenario, but okay. Prussian forces are permanently out of command for the duration of the scenario and must abide by all the restrictions of such units. As no leader is present, each good order unit must remain within 2 hexes of another. Okay. I don't know quite how to read that. Again, this seems to be a second thing that has nothing to do, and this isn't copied into the first part of the broader scenario that starts at the same time. I'm not cheating on Jena the way I am on Auerstaedt. So where is this shit about no leader present, each good ordered unit must remain within 2 of another? Looking, and the only command radius levels that deal with anything similar to this are the first and second. The first is leaders. That just has to do with morale checks and killing them. The second is command radius, which basically says you have to find your commander otherwise. Out of command units cannot voluntarily exit their hex, not covered in there unless they come back within their commander's radius, not possible. They remain out of command for that turn, even if this brings them back. And then limitations that say they can't move at all, which seems to have nothing to do with this 2 hex radius. So my feeling is this is some kind of special rule for this scenario, but it doesn't count in the full Jena scenario for some reason. Again, sloppiness in the rules. Maybe you're expected to look back and do this. This is the peculiar thing I did, was decided to look at the opening moves in the fog scenario to see what's up with that and what we want to do. with it. Now, I didn't look at reinforcements for this. Did we get Hohenlohe? Well, this is interesting. Hohenlohe shows up here. Oh, this is the second scenario. Never mind. Yeah. Prussian setup. They get no reinforcements, so Hohenlohe's not showing up. And it looks to me like the only units that would be set up are these. So anything further that I want to do shouldn't be in this scenario. I am planning for further things. We'll get to that in a bit when they start coming in, because they may come in after the restrictions are gone. But again, I'm left with this sort of, wow, these rules just really don't fit together well, you know. So, yep. And you know what I didn't do? We didn't melee anywhere. We didn't attack anywhere. So yeah, we're fine. I was trying to figure out if there was anything fatigue-wise here for the Prussians, and there isn't, unless they attack in melee, because they're not allowed to move. In the net effect, we got a hit here, which actually dropped his morale level down a point due to damage. It's kind of hard to see. Pencil on the photocopy doesn't hold up as well as you might hope. I wish this printed out a little lighter. How bad is it? Yeah, see, they're very dark on here, which is why, you know, a very light shading on these would have made it a little bit easier to see. I mean, pencil is essentially the same color as what I'm drawing over, which is less than optimal by all means. I can remember right now. But I also have a disorder marker there because they failed their morale check, fell back, and here you're starting to see why I don't like using these for fatigue. Is, you know, the disorders, there's going to be plenty of them on the board in addition to any numerical quantity, but the fatigue marker looks exactly the same, and now I've kind of not paying attention in the same way. I'm going to be looking at it more in the rally phase than anywhere else. I think it's important to keep both, but I may try to pull out some other number counters or something to handle fatigue, because that's just downright disturbing how similar it looks. The counters look similar enough as it is. I'm not going to do any melee attacks. That means we're going to push into, I guess this is the 7 turn. Yeah, this is the 7 a.m. turn. And we'll have the 6th Corps coming in, which has orders. So we're all good there.